Document. Part 6. The next morning, Emily woke up stiff and groggy. The couch had done little to cushion her back, and the blanket smelled faintly of mildew. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes as sunlight streamed through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. For a moment, she forgot where she wasn't till she saw Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, hunched over a small device that looked like a cross between a laptop and a toolbox. He glanced up when he heard her stir. "Morning," he said, his voice low and calm. "Sleep well, as well as I could on a lumpy couch." She replied with a wry smile, stretching her arms above her head. "What are you working on?" he said, gesturing to the device. It hummed softly, its screen displaying lines of code and schematics. "It's a diagnostic tool. I'm checking for weaknesses in my systems. If we're going to stay ahead of them, I need to make sure everything is running smoothly." Emily nodded, impressed by his focus. Despite the chaos surrounding them, he seemed entirely composed, almost robotic in his efficiency. She grabbed a granola bar from the bag of supplies and joined him at the table. "So what's the plan for today? Are we staying here or moving somewhere else?" "For now we stay," Daniel replied, tapping a few keys on the device. "I've set traps around the perimeter motion sensors and tripwires. If anyone comes close, we'll know about it. But we can't afford to relax. They'll be searching the area soon." Emily frowned, biting into her granola bar. "Do you think they know about this place?" "It's possible," he admitted. "If they've been watching you, they might have followed us here. That's why we need to act fast. Once I finish running diagnostics, I'll start preparing for the next step, which is," she asked, leaning forward. "Exposing the program," Daniel said firmly. "We need proof documents, files, anything that shows what they did to us. Without evidence, no one will believe our story." Emily hesitated, considering the risks. "Where do we find that kind of information?" "It's probably locked away in some government vault." "Not necessarily," Daniel said, his tone thoughtful. "When the program shut down, not everything was destroyed. Some records were leaked online by whistleblowers, others are stored on private servers. If we can access those, we can gather enough to expose the truth." "That sounds dangerous," Emily said, her voice tinged with concern. "How do we even begin?" "I'll handle the technical side," Daniel assured her. "Ain't your help with logistics. We'll need transportation, safe houses, and someone to spread the word once we have the evidence." Emily nodded, determination creeping into her expression. "Okay, I can do that. What do you need me to do first?" "Start by mapping out the area," he instructed, pulling out a folded map from his jacket pocket. "Mark places where we can hide if we need to move quickly. Look for abandoned buildings, caves, anything off the grid. And keep an eye on the roads leading into town. If you see unfamiliar vehicles, let me know immediately." "Got it," Emily said, unfolding the map and spreading it across the table. She traced the roads with her finger, committing landmarks to memory. Pine Ridge wasn't large, but the surrounding wilderness offered plenty of hiding spots. She circled a few locations: an old barn, a quarry, and a ranger station that hadn't been used in years. While she worked, Daniel continued tinkering with his diagnostic tool. Occasionally, he muttered something under his breath, adjusting wires or typing furiously. His concentration was absolute, as if nothing else existed outside the task at hand. Emily found herself watching him, marveling at how seamlessly he balanced humanity and machinery. He wasn't just a man wearing armor, he was something more, something extraordinary. By my mad afternoon, they had settled into a rhythm. Emily monitored the perimeter, using binoculars to scan the forest for movement, while Daniel worked on repairing his exoskeleton. The cabin grew warmer as the sun climbed higher, filling the space with golden light. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal-like to people sharing a quiet afternoon together, but the illusion shattered when Emily spotted headlights in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat as she lowered the binoculars and turned to Daniel. "Someone's coming," she whispered urgently. Daniel stood up instantly, his glowing eyes narrowing. "How far away?" "About half a mile," she said, pointing toward the road. "Two cars, black SUVs. They're here," he said grimly, strapping a holster to his side. Inside it was a sleek, futuristic-looking pistol. "Stay behind." me and do exactly as I say." Emily nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She grabbed a flashlight and followed him to the door, peering cautiously through the gap in the boards. Sure enough, the SUVs were approaching, their tires kicking up dust as they sped down the dirt road. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "We wait," Daniel said, his tone steady. "Let them come to us. If they find the cabin, we'll ambush them. If they pass by, we'll slip out the back and head for the quarry." Emily swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight tightly. She trusted Daniel, but the thought of confronting armed men made her stomach churn. Still, she forced herself to stay calm, focusing on his instructions. Minutes passed like hours as the SUVs drew closer. The sound of their engines grew louder, echoing through the trees. Then, suddenly, they stopped. Doors slammed, and voices carried through the air sharp, commanding tones that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. "They're here," Daniel murmured, crouching near the window. "Get ready." Emily nodded, her pulse racing. She clutched the flashlight like a weapon, though she knew it wouldn't do much against guns. Outside, footsteps crunched on gravel as the men approached the cabin. They moved cautiously, scanning the area with flashlights and rifles. One of them called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Come on out, Hayes. We know you're in there." Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he waited until the men were close enough to hear the faint buzz of his exoskeleton powering up. Then, with lightning speed, he burst through the door, tackling the nearest attacker before he could react. Emily watched in stunned silence as Daniel disarmed the man with ease. Twisting his rifle out of his grip and sending it flying into the bushes, the other men shouted in alarm, raising their weapons. Emily ducked back inside, her heart pounding. As gunfire erupted outside, bullets tore through the wooden walls, splintering the cabin's frame. She pressed herself against the floor, covering her ears to block out the deafening noise. Through the chaos, she heard Daniel's voice cutting through the din. "Emily, get out now." Summoning every ounce of courage, she crawled toward the back door, avoiding stray bullets as best she could. When she reached the threshold, she paused, glancing back at the scene outside. Daniel moved like a blur, dodging shots and taking down attackers with brutal efficiency. His glowing eyes blazed with intensity, and his mechanical limbs whirred. As he fought, taking a deep breath, Emily slipped out the door and ran toward the tree line, clutching the map tightly. She didn't look back, she couldn't. All she could do was follow Daniel's plan and hope they'd meet again at the rendezvous point. As she disappeared into the forest, sounds of battle faded behind her. Branches whipped at her face, and roots threatened to trip her, but she pushed forward, driven by sheer willpower. She didn't know if Daniel would survive the fight, but she refused to give up. Not now. Not after everything they'd been through. Deep in the woods, she finally collapsed against a tree, gasping for air. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the map in her hands. Thought echoed in her mind. They weren't done yet. Whatever happened next, she would keep fighting for Daniel, for the truth, and for everyone who deserved to know the cost of playing God. Document. Part 4. Emily's feet pounded against the pavement as she ran from the diner, her breath coming in short gasps. The cold air stung her lungs, but she didn't stop. She could hear voices shouting behind her, the police questioning Daniel, the chaos spilling out into the parking lot, but she forced herself to keep moving. Her mind raced with questions. Who were those men? Why had they attacked Daniel? And what exactly was he capable of? She finally slowed down when she reached her car, leaning against it to catch her breath. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her keys, and she glanced back toward the diner. The flashing lights of the police cars lit up the evening sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot. She couldn't see Daniel anymore, but she knew he was still there. Surrounded by officers who wouldn't understand what they were dealing with, her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. Pulling it out, she saw a text from Jake. Asterisk, asterisk, are you okay? What just happened? Asterisk, asterisk, Emily hesitated before replying. Asterisk, asterisk, I'm fine. Don't know what's going on. Scared. Asterisk, asterisk, Jake responded almost immediately. Asterisk, asterisk, me too. That guy, ... He's not normal. Be careful. Asterisk, asterisk, the message sent a chill down her spine. Yes, Jake was right, Daniel wasn't normal. But that didn't mean he was dangerous. At least not to her. Odd. Despite the violence she'd witnessed, something deep inside told her that Daniel was protecting himself, not attacking without reason. Still, the situation was far beyond anything she'd ever imagined, and she had no idea how to handle it. As she stood there, debating whether to drive away or stay close in case Daniel needed help, she noticed movement near the edge of the parking lot. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Daniel. His jacket was torn, and his face was partially obscured by the mask-like device. But he moved with the same eerie precision as before. He scanned the area quickly, then locked eyes with her. Emily froze, unsure whether to run or approach him. Before she could decide, he gestured for her to follow him. Without thinking, she obeyed, slipping into the driver's seat of her car and starting the engine. Daniel jogged ahead, leading her away from the diner and deeper into the quiet streets of Pine Ridge. They drove in silence for several minutes. The only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of crickets in the distance. Eventually, Daniel motioned for her to pull over near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Emily parked the car and stepped out, her heart pounding as she followed him inside. The building was dark and dusty, its windows boarded up, and its walls covered in graffiti. Daniel stopped in the center of the room and turned to face her. His glowing eyes seemed even brighter in the dim light, piercing through the shadows like twin spotlights. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "I didn't have much of a choice," Emily replied, crossing her arms. "You told me to leave, so I did. Now I want answers." Daniel sighed, running a hand over his face sore, rather the metallic plate covering part of it. For the first time, he looked weary, almost human. "This isn't your fight, Emily. You don't deserve to be dragged into this. It's too late for that," she shot back. "Those men attacked you in front of everyone. Police are involved now. Whatever's happening, it's already affecting this town. So you owe me an explanation." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Fair enough." He began pacing back and forth, his movements deliberate and controlled. "My name is Daniel Hayes. I used to be part of a secret military program, a project designed to create super soldiers using advanced technology fused with human biology. They called us enhanced operatives. We were faster, stronger, more resilient than any ordinary soldier. But the cost," trailed off, his voice heavy with regret. "What cost?" Emily asked softly, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "The procedures, they weren't safe. Many of us died during testing. Those who survived were left scarred, physically and mentally. When the program was shut down, we were abandoned. Some of us went rogue, others disappeared. But the government never forgot about us. They've been hunting us ever since." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "And those men at the diner? They work for a private contractor hired to track down former operatives," Daniel explained. "They're not interested in justice there after the tech embedded in our bodies. If they capture us, they'll dismantle us piece by piece. To study the enhancements." Emily shuddered at the thought. "Why are they targeting you specifically?" "Because I'm one of the last ones left," Daniel admitted. "Most of my teammates are dead. The rest are hiding better than I am. I've been on the run for years, staying off the grid, avoiding attention. But lately they've been closing in. Coming here was a mistake." Emily shook her head, trying to process everything he'd told her. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie, yet she couldn't deny the evidence in front of her. Glowing eyes, the mechanical limbs, the unnatural speed and strength. He wasn't lying. "This was real. So what happens now?" she asked finally. "What do you plan to do?" "I need to keep moving," Daniel said. "Find somewhere else to hide until they give up the search. But I can't stay here. Not anymore." Emily frowned. "What about the people in Pine Ridge? What if those men come back looking for you?" "They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way." Daniel's jaw tightened. That's why I need you to stay away. Forget you ever met me. Go back to your life and pretend none of this happened, and let them destroy my town?" Emily snapped, surprising even herself with the sharpness of her tone. "No, I can't do that. You don't have a choice," Daniel said firmly. "This isn't your fight, Emily. You're risking your life just by standing here talking." "To me, I don't care," she retorted. "If those men come back, they'll tear Pine Ridge apart looking for you. I can't sit back and let that happen. Besides," she hesitated, lowering her voice, "you saved us today. You protected everyone in that diner. You're not the monster they're making you out to be." Daniel stared at her, his glowing eyes flickering faintly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish," he muttered. "Maybe both," Emily said with a small smile. Daniel shook his head, but there was a hint of amusement in his expression. "Fine. If you're determined to help, there's something you can do. But it's risky." "What is it?" Emily asked eagerly. "There's a cabin outside town, an old place owned by your uncle, according to what you mentioned earlier. If I can lay low there for a few days, I might be able to throw them off my trail. In exchange, I'll share information. That could expose the truth about the program. Information that might stop them from coming after me and others like me." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean go public?" "Yes," Daniel said. "But only if you're willing to take the risk. Once you get involved, there's no turning back." She hesitated, weighing the consequences. Helping Daniel meant putting herself and, possibly, her entire town in danger. But doing nothing meant letting those men win, letting them hunt him down like an animal. She thought about the look in his eyes during the fight at the diner. Not anger or hatred, but determination. He wasn't fighting to hurt people. He was fighting to survive. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady despite the knot of fear in her stomach. "Tell me what you need." Daniel nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his glowing eyes. "First, we need to make sure no one follows us. Those men will be watching. Second, gather whatever supplies you can, food, water, medical supplies. I'll need them to repair some of the damage to my systems." "Repair?" Emily echoed, alarmed. "Are you hurt?" "Not badly," he assured her. "But the exoskeleton requires maintenance. Without it, I won't last long." Emily swallowed hard, nodding again. "Okay, I'll handle it. Just give me a little time." "Time is something we don't have much of," Daniel warned. "But I trust you'll do what needs to be done." For the first time since meeting him, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't turn her back on Daniel. Not now. Not after seeing the truth behind the armor. Document Part 5. The drive to the cabin was tense and quiet. Emily gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white as she navigated the narrow, winding road that led out of Pine Ridge. The forest loomed on either side, its dark shadows swallowing the beams of her headlights. Every so often, she glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see another car following them. But the road behind was empty, just a ribbon of asphalt fading into darkness. Daniel sat beside her, his posture rigid and alert. He hadn't spoken much since leaving the warehouse, but his glowing eyes darted constantly between the windows, scanning for any sign of danger. His presence filled the small car, making it feel smaller than it already was. Emily wanted to ask him more questions to understand what he was thinking or feeling, but she didn't dare break the silence. Something about the weight of the moment kept her tongue tied. When they finally reached the cabin, Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The old wooden structure stood at the edge of a clearing, surrounded by towering pine trees. Its paint was peeling, and the porch sagged slightly under the weight of years, but it was sturdy enough to provide shelter. Her uncle had used it as a hunting retreat decades ago, but it had been abandoned for years now. No one ever came here anymore. "This will work," Daniel said, stepping out of the car. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a mix of relief and caution. Emily grabbed a bag of supplies from the back seat and followed him inside. Damn wouldn't made him sigh like damp wood and forgotten memories.
I'll
Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the corners of the ceiling. A single bulb flickered weakly in the center of the room, casting long, uneven shadows across the floor. It wasn't luxurious, but it would have to do. "I'll clean up," Emily offered, setting the bag down on the kitchen counter. "There's a broom somewhere." Daniel shook his head. "Don't bother. We don't have time. I need to check the perimeter first." Before she could respond, he disappeared through the front door, moving with the same fluid precision she'd seen before. Emily sighed and started unpacking the supplies instead. She laid out canned food, bottled water, and a first aid kit, along with a few tools she'd brought just in case. As she worked, her mind raced with thoughts of what might come next. How long would they stay here? What if someone found them? Most importantly, how could she possibly help Daniel expose the truth about the program? A short while later, Daniel returned, his expression unreadable. "The area is clear for now, but we can't assume we're safe. They'll be looking for us." "Who exactly are they?" Emily asked, unable to hold back her curiosity any longer. "You said private." "Contractors, but who hired them?" Daniel hesitated, then leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "It's complicated. Some of the people hunting me are former members of the program operatives who went rogue after it shut down. Others work for corporations that want to reverse engineer the tech embedded in our bodies. And then there are government agents, tasked with cleaning up loose ends." Emily frowned. "Loose ends? You mean killing anyone left alive?" He nodded grimly. "They call it containment. To them, we're not human anymore. We're experiments gone wrong." The words sent a chill down her spine. She stared at him, trying to reconcile the man standing in front of her with the image of a lab experiment. Despite the armor and enhancements, he still looked human. His scars told stories of pain and survival, and his glowing eyes reflected intelligence and determination. Whatever he had become, he wasn't a monster. "So what happens if they find you?" she asked quietly. "They'll take me apart." He said simply, "Piece by piece. Study the tech, sell it to the highest bidder, and erase all evidence that I ever existed." Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Then we won't let that happen." Daniel studied her for a moment, his expression softening slightly. "Keep saying that? Why? Why risk your life for someone you barely know?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because you saved mine? Because you saved everyone in that diner? And because—" She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Because no one should be treated like an experiment. Like this." "Don't matter." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint creak of the old cabin settling around them. Finally, Daniel nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his glowing eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "I won't forget this." Emily managed a small smile, though her hands were still trembling. "Let's focus on keeping you alive for now. What do you need me to do?" "First, I need to repair some of the damage to my systems," he explained, gesturing to the exoskeleton. "Integrated into his body. Parts of it were damaged during the fight earlier. If I don't fix it soon, my mobility will start to degrade." "Can I help?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not directly. But you can hand me tools and keep watch while I work. And if anything seems afiff, you hear cars approaching or see lights in the distance, let me know immediately." "It," Emily said, nodding firmly. She retrieved the toolkit from her bag and set it on the table. "Where do we start?" Daniel pulled off his jacket, revealing more of the intricate machinery beneath. Wires and metal plates crisscrossed his skin, pulsing faintly with light. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing patches of scarred flesh where the tech met biology. Emily winced at the sight. It looked painful, invasive. Yet Daniel showed no signs of discomfort as he began examining the damaged sections. "Pass me the screwdriver," he instructed, pointing to a specific tool. Emily handed it over quickly, watching as he carefully unscrewed a panel on his forearm. Beneath it lay a maze of circuits and wires, glowing softly in the dim light. He worked methodically, his movements steady and precise. "What happened here?" Emily asked, pointing to a blackened section of wiring. "Short circuit," he replied, without looking up. One of the attackers hit me with an EMP pulse. It fried part of the system controlling my balance sensors. If I don't replace it, I'll lose coordination within a day. Emily nodded, filing the information away. She wanted to ask more questions about the program, about his teammates, about everything, but she could tell he needed to focus. Instead, she stayed silent, handing him tools whenever he asked and keeping an eye on the windows. Hours passed in this way, the two of them working together in near silence. Outside, the forest grew darker as night fell, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Inside, the cabin felt almost peaceful, despite the tension hanging in the air. For the first time since meeting him, Emily felt like they were truly partners, united by a shared goal. Eventually, Daniel leaned back with a sigh, wiping sweat from his brow. "That should hold for now," he said, reattaching the panel to his arm. "But I'll need proper parts to fully repair it." "This was just a patch job. We can figure that out tomorrow," Emily assured him. "For tonight, you should rest." Nodded, though his expression remained wary. "We'll take shifts keeping watch. I'll take the first one." "No way," Emily argued. "You've been through enough today. Let me go first." "It's not up for debate," he said firmly. "I'm better equipped to handle trouble if it comes. Get some sleep." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but the look in his eyes stopped her. There was no room for argument. Reluctantly, she nodded and curled up on the couch, pulling a dusty blanket over herself. The last thing she saw before closing her eyes was Daniel sitting by the window, his glowing gaze fixed on the darkness beyond. Despite her exhaustion, Emily couldn't fall asleep right away. Mind churned with thoughts of what they were facing and what might lie ahead. She trusted Daniel, but she also knew they couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, their pursuers would find them. When that happened, they'd need more than repairs and supplies. They'd need a plan. As she drifted off, one thought lingered in her mind. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Document Part 3. The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of unease. She had tossed and turned all night, her dreams filled with strange images, glowing eyes, mechanical limbs, and shadowy figures moving through the forest. By the time her alarm went off, she felt groggy and restless. Still, she forced herself to get out of bed and start her day. As she drove to work, she kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following her. But the road behind her was empty. When she arrived at the diner, everything seemed normal. The early crowd of construction workers and truck drivers filled the booths, chatting loudly over plates of eggs and bacon. Jake Monroe sat at his usual spot near the counter, sipping coffee while reading the local newspaper. Emily greeted him with a smile as she tied on her apron. "Morning, Em," he said, folding the paper and setting it aside. "You look like you didn't sleep well." "I'm fine," she replied quickly, though her dark circles betrayed her words. "Just thinking about stuff." Jake raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he nodded toward the door. "Speaking of stuff, your mysterious friend isn't here yet? Disappointed?" Emily shot him a playful glare. "Not at all. I've got plenty to do without waiting for strangers to show up." But deep down, she couldn't deny that part of her hoped he would return. There was something magnetic about Himapol she couldn't explain. Whether it was curiosity or concern, she wasn't sure. All she knew was that she wanted answers. As the morning wore on, the diner grew busier. Emily moved between tables, taking orders and refilling drinks, trying to keep her mind occupied. But every time the bell above the door jingled, her heart skipped a beat. Each new customer turned out to be someone familiar, regular face from town, but the anticipation lingered around noon. Just as Emily was clearing dishes from a booth, the bell rang again. This time, when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. It was him. The stranger stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the bright sunlight streaming through the glass. He wasn't wearing his full armor today, but parts of the exoskeleton were still visible beneath his jacket. His glowing eyes scanned the room before landing on her. For a moment, they locked gazes. Then, without a word, he walked toward the counter and took a seat. Emily hesitated, unsure whether to approach him or let someone else take his order. But before she could decide, Jake leaned back in his chair and called out, "Hey, big guy, back for more water?" The stranger glanced at Jake, his expression unreadable. "No, coffee." Jake chuckled nervously, clearly unsettled by the man's intensity. Emily stepped forward, forcing a smile, coming right up. She poured a mug of coffee and set it in front of him, careful not to make eye contact. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the sugar and cream within reach. "Anything else?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "No," he replied, curtly. His tone was polite but distant, as if he were deliberately maintaining a barrier between them. Emily nodded and retreated to the other side of the counter, where Jake was watching intently. "What's with the cold shoulder?" he whispered. "Thought you two were buddies now." "We're not buddies," Emily muttered under her breath. "I barely know him." "Well, he sure seems interested in you," Jake said, nodding toward the stranger. Sure enough, the man's glowing eyes were fixed on Emily, his gaze unwavering. She felt a flush creep up her neck and quickly turned away, pretending to organize napkins. The rest of the afternoon passed uneventfully. The stranger stayed in his seat, nursing his coffee and occasionally glancing at the clock. Other customers came and went, their conversations filling the air. But he remained silent and still, like a statue carved from steel. Emily tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Why had he returned? What did he want? By late afternoon, the diner had emptied out, leaving only a few stragglers. Emily decided to take a chance. Grabbing a pot of coffee, she approached the stranger's table. "Need a refill?" she asked, holding up the pot. He nodded once, pushing his mug toward her. As she poured, she summoned the courage to speak. "You never told me your name." "Daniel," he said after a pause. His voice was low and even, carrying a weight that made her hesitate. "Nice to meet you, Daniel," she said softly. "I'm Emily, I know," he replied, meeting her gaze. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, sending a shiver down her spine. "You've been asking about me?" Emily blinked in surprise. "How do you know that? I have my ways," he said cryptically. Before she could ask what he meant, he added, "You shouldn't involve yourself in this. It's dangerous." Her heart raced. "In what? What are you talking about?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the room, his movements sharp and deliberate. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost a whisper. "There are people looking for me, people who won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way." Emily swallowed hard, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Who are these people? Why are they after you?" "It's better if you don't know," he said firmly. "Stay out of it, Emily, for your own safety." Before she could respond, the bell above the door jingled, signaling another customer. Both Emily and Daniel turned to look, then entered the diner, their faces obscured by baseball caps and sunglasses. They moved with purpose, scanning the room until their eyes landed on Daniel. One of them smirked, revealing a glint of metal in his mouth. Well, the man said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who we found." Daniel's posture changed instantly. His shoulders tensed and his hand drifted toward his side, where a holster might have been hidden beneath his jacket. Emily instinctively stepped back, her instincts screaming at her to run. But she froze, unable to tear her eyes away from the scene unfolding before her. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his tone icy. "You know exactly what we want." The second man growled, pulling a gun from his waistband. The weapon gleamed ominously in the fluorescent light. "Hand it over, or we'll take it by force." The diner fell silent. The few remaining customers scrambled for cover, ducking behind booths and chairs. Emily pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. What were they talking about? What did they want from Daniel? "Leave now," Daniel said calmly, standing up. Despite the threat of violence, he didn't seem afraid. If anything, he looked ready, prepared even. The first man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You really think you can fight us? Look at you! You're outnumbered." Respond. Instead, he moved with lightning speed, closing the distance between himself and the armed man in a single step. Before anyone could react, he disarmed the attacker, twisting the gun out of his grip and sending it clattering to the floor. Second man lunged forward, swinging a knife. but Daniel sidestepped effortlessly. Grabbing his wrist and slamming him into the counter, Emily watched in stunned silence as the fight unfolded. Daniel's movements were fluid and precise, almost mechanical. He moved faster than any human should, his strength unmatched. Within seconds, both attackers were on the ground, groaning in pain. Daniel stood over them, his glowing eyes blazing. With intensity, "Get out," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "And tell your boss, I'm not interested." The men scrambled to their feet, casting fearful glances at Daniel before bolting out the door. The diner erupted into chaos as the remaining customers began talking all at once, their voices overlapping. In shock and disbelief, Emily remained frozen, her legs trembling beneath her. Daniel turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone gentler now. She nodded numbly, unable to form words. Her mind was reeling. What had she just witnessed? Who or what was Daniel? Why were those men after him? Jake appeared beside her, his face pale. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, staring at Daniel. "Who are you?" Daniel ignored the question, focusing instead on Emily. "You need to leave," he said urgently. Now, but she started to protest. "No arguments," he interrupted, his voice firm. "It's not safe here anymore." Before she could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed outside as police cars screeched to a halt in front of the diner. Daniel cursed under his breath and grabbed his jacket. "Go," he urged, stepping toward the back exit. "I'll handle this." Emily hesitated, torn between fear and confusion. But as the officers burst through the door, guns drawn, she realized she had no choice. She slipped out the side entrance, her heart pounding as she ran into the parking lot. Behind her, she heard shouts and the sound of footsteps. Whatever was happening, one thing was clear. Pine Ridge would never be the same again. Document. Part 2. The morning after the stranger's visit, Pine Ridge buzzed with quiet whispers. News of the mysterious man in the diner spread quickly, even though no one had much information to share. Emily Carter couldn't stop thinking about him as she walked to work the next day. The image of his glowing eyes and the faint hum of machinery beneath his armor lingered in her mind. She replayed their brief conversation over and over, trying to make sense of it. Was he really just passing through? Or was there something more to his story? When she arrived at the diner, Jake Monroe was already seated at his usual spot near the counter. He looked up from his coffee mug as she entered. "Morning, Em," he said, his tone casual, but his expression curious. "Morning," Emily replied, tying her apron around her waist. She glanced around the nearly empty room before leaning closer to him. "Did you hear anyone talking about, last night?" Jake smirked. "You mean the guy who looked like he stepped out of a video game?" "I heard some folks chatting about it. Old man Harris said he thought the guy might have been a robot." Emily rolled her eyes, but couldn't help smiling. "A robot? Really?" "Hey, I'm just telling you what I heard," Jake said, holding up his hands defensively. "Personally, I think he's ex-military, maybe special ops or something." That gear looked pretty high-tech. Emily nodded slowly, considering the possibility. It made sense, sort of. There was still something about the stranger that didn't add up. His movements were too fluid, too precise, like every step and gesture was calculated. And those eyes, they weren't normal. Not human, at least not entirely, as the day went on. The diner filled with customers, and the topic of the mysterious visitor came up repeatedly. Some people joked about aliens or superheroes, while others speculated about government experiments. One woman claimed she'd seen military trucks parked outside town a few weeks ago and suggested they might be connected. Emily listened to all the theories, but none of them felt quite right. By late afternoon, the chatter had died down, and Emily found herself wishing the stranger would return. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was the nagging feeling that she'd missed something important during their encounter. Either way, she couldn't shake the thought of him. Around sunset, the bell above the door jingled, signaling another customer. Emily turned automatically, expecting to see one of the regulars. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. It was him, the same towering figure from the night before. This time, he wasn't wearing his full armor. Beneath the dark jacket, she could see parts of the exoskeleton integrated into his body. Wires and metal plates peeked out from his sleeves and collar, pulsing faintly with light. His face was partially covered by a mask-like device, but his glowing eyes were unmistakable. He scanned the room briefly before heading straight for the counter. Emily forced herself to stay calm as she approached him. "Again?" she asked, injecting a note of cheerfulness into her voice. "Yes," he replied simply. His tone was neutral, neither friendly nor hostile. "What can I get you this?" "Time?" she asked, grabbing a clean mug. "Water," he said. His voice was deeper than she remembered, carrying a strange resonance that sent a shiver down her spine. As Emily poured the water, she studied him carefully. Without the full suit of armor, he seemed less intimidating, but only slightly. His presence still dominated the room, drawing stares from the other patrons. Up close, she noticed scars on his exposed skin, pale lines crisscrossing his hands and neck. They looked old, faded, but they hinted at a life filled with danger and pain. "You're not from around here, are you?" she ventured, setting the glass in front of him. "No," he confirmed, taking a sip of water. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if conserving energy. "I figured," Emily said with a nervous laugh. "So, where are you headed?" the question seemed to catch him off guard. He hesitated before answering. "I don't know yet." Emily frowned. "You're just wandering." "In a way," he said, cryptically. His glowing eyes met hers, and for a moment she felt like he was looking straight through her. Complicated. Before she could press further, the door opened again, and a group of teenagers burst into the diner, laughing and talking loudly. The noise broke the spell, and the stranger shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Emily noticed how his hand instinctively moved toward his side, where a holster would be if he were carrying a weapon. But there was nothing there, just more wires and metal. "Do you want anything else?" she asked quickly, sensing his discomfort. "No," he said, standing up. He left a few bills on the counter, far more than the cost of the water. "Thank you. Wait." Emily blurted out before she could stop herself. The stranger paused, turning back to face her. If you need a place to stay, there's a cabin my uncle owns just outside town. It's not much, but it's private. No one goes there anymore." For a long moment, he stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly he nodded. "I'll consider it." With that, he turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the twilight. Emily watched him go, her heart racing. What had possessed her to offer him the cabin? She barely knew him, and something about him screamed danger. Yet, she couldn't ignore the pull she felt, a strange mix of curiosity and concern. Jake appeared beside her, breaking her train of thought. "What was that about?" he asked, nodding toward the door. "I offered him a place to stay," Emily admitted sheepishly. Jake raised an eyebrow. "You did what now?" "It's fine," she insisted, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. "He won't take me up on it anyway." Probably. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. Something told her the stranger would be backhand. When he returned, things in Pine Ridge would never be the same. Later that evening, after closing the diner, Emily drove home, her mind racing. She replayed every interaction she'd had with the stranger, searching for clues about who or what he really was. The scars, the glowing eyes, the mechanical worry sounds she'd heard when he moved. None of it added up to anything. Ordinary. And yet, despite the strangeness, she didn't feel afraid of him. If anything, she felt drawn to him, like there was a story waiting to be uncovered. When she pulled into her driveway, she noticed movement in the shadows near the edge of her property. Her pulse quickened as she squinted into the darkness. For a terrifying moment, she thought someone was watching her. But then she realized it was just a deer, its silhouette outlined by the moonlight. Letting out a shaky breath, she climbed out of her car and hurried inside. Once indoors, she locked the door and leaned against it, trying to steady her nerves. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the stranger. Who was he? Why had he come to Pine Ridge? And why did she feel so compelled to help him? Unable to relax, Emily grabbed her laptop and began researching online. She typed keywords like combat, exoskeleton, augmented humans, and military experiments into the search bar. Scrolling through articles and forums, most of what she found was speculative nonsense, sci-fi fan theories, and conspiracy blogs. But one article caught her attention. It described a secret government program aimed at creating super soldiers using advanced technology fused with human biology. The project had supposedly been shut down years ago due to ethical concerns, but rumors persisted that some participants had gone rogue. Emily stared at the screen, her stomach churning. Could the stranger be one of them? Was that why he was hiding in a small town like Pine Ridge? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. If he really was part of something like that, then helping him could put her in serious danger. She closed her laptop and sat in silence, staring out the window. Outside, the world was quiet, bathed in silver moonlight. Everything seemed peaceful, untouched by the chaos lurking beneath the surface. For a moment, Emily wished she could go back to the simplicity of yesterday, before the stranger had walked into her life. But deep down, she knew that wasn't possible. Whatever was coming, she was already involved. As she climbed into bed, her mind refused to quiet. Images of glowing eyes and mechanical limbs danced behind her eyelids. She drifted off to sleep, with one final thought: tomorrow would bring answers or maybe more questions. Either way, she was ready. Document. Part 1. The small town of Pine Ridge lay nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where life moved at a slow pace and nothing exciting ever happened. The diner on Main Street was the heart of the community, a cozy spot with red vinyl booths, a jukebox that hadn't worked in years, and a neon sign outside that flickered faintly in the night. On this particular evening, the diner was quiet, just like it always was after midnight. Only a handful of people remained inside: Emily Carter, one of the waitresses; Jake Monroe, the deputy who often stopped by for coffee during his late shifts; and to truck drivers who were passing through town, Emily wiped down the counter absent-mindedly, her mind drifting to thoughts of her day off tomorrow. She glanced at the clock above the register. It was nearly 12:30 a.m. The diner would close soon, and she could finally go home. Outside, the wind rustled the trees and the occasional car drove past, its headlights casting fleeting shadows across the room. Everything seemed normal until the door opened. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted by the dim glow of the neon sign. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary person, albeit unusually tall and broad-shouldered. But as the door swung shut behind him, something about the way he moved caught Emily's attention. His steps were deliberate, almost mechanical, and completely silent despite his size. He paused for a moment, scanning the room with sharp, calculating eyes before walking toward the counter. Everyone froze. Even the truck drivers, who had been chatting loudly moments ago, fell silent. There was something unsettling about this stranger. His presence filled the space in a way that made it hard to breathe. He wore what appeared to be some sort of heavy, gear-thick, reinforced plates covering his arms, legs, and torso. The material gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, giving it an otherworldly appearance. A helmet-like visor obscured most of his face, leaving only his mouth visible. Despite the bulky outfit, he moved with surprising grace, as if the weight didn't affect him at all. "Well," Jake muttered under his breath, breaking the tense silence. "That's new." Emily forced herself to smile as the stranger approached the counter. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a menu. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. The man nodded once, his movements precise. "Coffee," he said simply. His voice was deep and calm, but there was an edge to a tan authority that made Emily instinctively straighten up. She turned to grab a mug, trying not to stare too obviously. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jake leaning forward in his seat, watching the newcomer intently. "Anything else?" Emily asked, placing the mug on the counter. "No." The man's response was curt, but not rude. He pulled out a wad of cash and placed it on the counter without counting it. Then, without another word, he turned and walked to the farthest booth in the corner. The sound of his boots against the tiled floor echoed unnaturally loud in the otherwise quiet diner. For a moment, no one spoke. The truck drivers exchanged wary glances, then resumed their conversation in hushed tones. Jake leaned back in his chair, his hand resting casually on the holster of his gun. Emily busied herself with refilling salt shakers and stacking napkins, but her mind kept returning to the stranger. There was something off about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. As she poured his coffee and carried it to his table, she noticed more details. The armor, or whatever it was, seemed to fit him perfectly, as though it had been custom-made. Yet it wasn't just clothing. It looked like it was part of him somehow. Beneath the plates, she caught glimpses of intricate wiring and mechanisms that pulsed faintly with light. And his posture was too perfect, too controlled. No matter how relaxed he appeared, there was an underlying tension, as if he were constantly ready for action. "Here you go," Emily said, setting the mug down on the table. She hesitated for a second, unsure whether to say anything else. The man looked up at her, his expression unreadable behind the visor. Up close, she realized his eyes weren't entirely human. They glowed faintly, a soft blue hue that seemed to pierce right through her. "Thank you," he said, his tone polite, but distant. Emily nodded quickly and retreated to the counter, her heart pounding. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept circling back to the stranger. Who was he? What was he doing here? And why did he feel so wrong? Jake eventually broke the silence. "You okay, Em?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. She nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just weird vibes, you know?" Jake chuckled dryly. "Tell me about it. Guy looks like he stepped out of a sci-fi movie. Bet he's some kind of bounty hunter or something." "Or a soldier," Emily murmured, glancing at the stranger again. He hadn't touched his coffee yet. Instead, he sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the window as if waiting for something or someone. The minutes ticked by slowly. The truck drivers finished their meal and left, muttering about strange townsfolk. Jake lingered a little longer, sipping his coffee and occasionally glancing at the stranger. Finally, he stood up, tipped his hat to Emily, and headed out the door. The diner grew quieter, till it was just Emily and the mysterious visitor. Unable to resist her curiosity any longer, Emily decided to try talking to him again. She grabbed a rag and pretended to clean nearby tables, inching closer to his booth. When she was within earshot, she cleared her throat softly. "So," she began, keeping her tone casual. "Passing through, huh?" The man turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence. Yes, his brevity didn't discourage her. If anything, it fueled her determination to learn more. "Not a lot of travelers come through Pine Ridge. What brings you here?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "Business." "What kind of business?" Emily pressed, leaning against the edge of the booth. This time, he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her carefully, as if weighing whether or not to trust her. After a long pause, he said, "Private matters." Emily frowned, sensing the dismissal in his tone. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than he was letting on. Before she could think of another question, the bell above the door jingled, signaling another customer. Both Emily and the stranger looked toward the entrance. But it was only Old Man Harris, a regular who liked to sit by the window and read newspapers late into the night. "I'll get him settled," Emily said, backing away from the booth. As she walked to greet Harris, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder at the stranger. He had returned his attention to the window, his posture rigid and alert. Whatever his business was, it clearly wasn't over yet. The rest of the night passed uneventfully. Harris chatted amiably while sipping his tea, blissfully unaware of the tension filling the air. Emily continued her rounds, cleaning and organizing, but her mind remained preoccupied with the man in the corner. By the time closing hour arrived, Harris had left, and the stranger had drained his coffee cup. Emily approached his table cautiously, holding a check slip. "We're closing up now," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Do you need anything else?" "No," he replied, standing up. For the first time, Emily noticed how much taller he was than her towering even. Up close, the sheer scale of his armored frame was intimidating. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Directions to the nearest motel? Emily blinked in surprise. Sure. Just go down this road for about 2 miles. You'll see a sign. For the Pine Ridge and thank you, he said, tucking the directions into a compartment on his arm. Without another word, he strode toward the exit, the floor creaking slightly under his weight. Emily watched as he disappeared into the night, the neon sign casting eerie shadows across his retreating figure. Once he was gone, she let out a breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding. The diner felt eerily empty without him. Shaking her head, she locked the door and began the process of shutting everything down. As she flipped off the last light and stepped outside, she couldn't shake the nagging sense that tonight had been the beginning of something far bigger and far stranger than she could have imagined.